Aetius was content to follow prudently the Hun army leaving Gaul, in presenting his actions as the pursuit of a recoiling opponent. He sent Ravenna unceasingly bulletins on the liberation of the cities. The leaders of the allies, at first timid, began to believe, little by little, of the flight of the Huns under the fear of their coalition armies. They gradually become more and more warlike. The Visigoth prince Thorismund, young and fiery, began to speak often of the desire to take revenge on the Huns for the shame of his ancestors and to punish the Ostrogoths, traitors who had become the most faithful vassals of Attila. His father Theodoric remained more tranquil, but began to support the idea of the battle with the Huns. This invasion of Attila prevented him from beginning the war against Genseric, the king of the Vandals, of which a son married one of his daughters. The Visigoth princess, accused of participating in the conspiracy of a part of the Vandal nobility against Genseric, was sent back to her father with her nose and ears cut off. Aetius said that Attila was negotiating with this inhuman Genseric, who exterminated his predecessor's family at the beginning of his reign, to incite the Vandals to strike the Visigoths from behind. The warlike ardor rises more when the army of the Burgunds King Gondioc arrives at last. The Franks of King Morove wanted revenge on the Huns and their Germanic allies for the devastation of part of their country on the Lower Rhine. To provoke the battle, they decided to attack the Jeffords, the rearguard of the army of Attila. The Franks declares a great victory and says that the Jeffords have lost 3 times as many warriors as they. The Franks succeeded in seizing a few carts laden with spoils. The brilliance of gold, silver and precious stones provokes an irresistible desire to seize all the trophies of the Hun army. Some of the old Burgundian warriors recount on this occasion the happy attack of the army of Octa, an uncle of Attila, sleeping after the feast at the time of their distant youth. One forget all the defeats. Prudent, the Elan's king Sanjaban is silent, but most of his warriors also yield to the mood that reigns. Increasingly, Aetius's caution is being spoken of. Everyone remembers his long-standing friendship with Attila. Begin to circulate rumors about the possibility of a plot between the two friends. But Aetius is a proud, courageous and determined man. If all these barbarians want to fight, he is ready to give them such a pleasure. Let them kill each other on these wide fields. It is sure to survive with the majority of its legionaries entrenched on the hills protected by walls of shields and long lances. Attila would not even lose much time for unnecessary attacks by horsemen against the ranked legionaries, but would take care of those one-hour allies, who at the first opportunity would become enemies again. In 2 days the Huns will leave and Aetius will cry out his victory.
As it turned out, Attila's traces can be found in close proximity to Paris. One of the most mysterious ones is a cross standing near the village of Origny-le-Sec. So this is the one? Yes, and even a more ancient one was probably standing here before this one. Okay. Yes, and it was called Attila's cross for some reason. Could it have been Tengrian? Why not? The honey cross is only one among the riddles in the village of Origny. The second one is related to how the French call the locals, the Jouquins. Why? He had confirmed that the village and the ancestors of village residents were under the honey rule for some time. Joug in French means yoke or bondage, and this is the reason why the residents of these and some neighboring communities are called Jouquins or Jouguins. Did you see that green area over there? It's a forest and it has Attila's ravine. So that was Attila's cross, and now we will go further out of the village. This section of the road is called Attila's road.
Будем выходить из деревни, этот участок дороги называется дорогой Аттилы.
Can we go there now? Yes.
Вот как нам рассказал молодой жука.
So, as that young Jucan has told us, the road at this end of the village is called Attila's road. Indeed, this is the place where an ancient Roman road once went.
Вот здесь проходила древняя римская дорога.
So both the Roman legions and Attila's soldiers marched it, no doubt, and the locals still remember it. Following Attila's road slightly further out, we reach the town of Mary-sur-Seine to actually touch the events of the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains.
Вот мы только что пересекли реку Сена.
So we just crossed the Seine River. Here on this map you can see where we are now, the Seine and the road we took to get here. This is where the huge camp of Attila's Germanic allies, the Japids, under the leadership of Ardaric, was located.
Германских союзников Аттилы, гепидов, под руководством их короля Ардариха.
After capturing Orleans, Attila's army advanced to the northeast, to the Catalaunian Plains. The Japids infantry in the army's rear guard stopped near the village of Mary-sur-Seine for an overnight. And then, when they were already asleep, the Franks' army approached from the side of Romilly. The Franks were a Germanic tribe that had two kings. One of them supported the Romans and the other one allied with Attila. The sleeping Japids were attacked by the ones that were siding with the Romans. That was the beginning of the Battle of the Catalaunian Plains. I prefer to call it a military engagement because it took place over vast areas. The Catalaunian Plains represent an extensive valley in the northeast part of France. For the most part, this smooth area remains the vast and open steppe space. Could it have been the reason why Attila decided to lead his troops exactly here for the decisive battle? The steppe cavalry could comfortably maneuver in these vast expanses. So with the defeat of the Gepidi, the beginning of the Catalaunian battle turned out not that good for the Huns. While the Japids were only an insignificant part of Attila's army, many other Germanic tribes were among his allies. Close to this place, a wealthy burial of a Germanic leader was found. The grave contained golden jewelry and two swords, which quite probably could have belonged to a Gepidi king that met his death during that fatal night from a Frank blade. To see the swords, the expedition is going to the museum of the city of Troyes. Look at that! Indeed, this is an exciting moment for any representative of steppe nations. These swords are of the Hunnic era and belonged either to the Huns or their allies. The golden artifacts that were found in the same grave are also made in the Hunnic style. Yes, it is very similar. The Catalaunian Plains keep yet another mysterious legend. Allegedly, the inhabitants of one of the local villages are the descendants of wounded Attila soldiers who were forced to stay here on the hands of the locals.
Mais vous avez quand même aussi les yeux un peu... Non, non, non.
Celui-là, l'autre d'après.
Oui.
Et en face, il y a une maison, et là...
Oui, c'est gentil.
Ouais, au revoir.
Oui, au revoir. житель деревни.
During the conversation, the village resident has confirmed this legend known to each member of the community. Multiple studies indicate that from time to time, the children born here have the so-called Mongolian spots. I wish we could examine all the children in the village. At last, we have arrived at perhaps the main Attila's legacy on the territory of France. It has not only remained but was rethought and specifically highlighted by the present-day French. We are in the village of La Chape, also known as Attila's camp. There's even an Attila's monument. Wow! We could expect anything but a monument honoring Attila in France. Pierre Ribieux, a local historian and the first president of Attila Camp Association, and Pierre Bonnet, mayor of the village of La Chape, who have warmly welcomed us, put a lot of effort into this first and so far the only Attila monument in France. Attila is a part of our history and a famous and mythical personality. Ask any person, any school student. Each of them will know something about who Attila was. In recent years, the very image of Attila has been changing. Thanks to new data and in particular the efforts of Professor Tomsky, we are starting to understand that Attila wasn't that wild barbarian as he was depicted previously. The monument is made of 10 mm thick steel, weighs 120 kilograms and consists of 100 details. 15 school students, 15 to 17 years of age, participated in the work. The opening ceremony took place June the 4th, 2012. A delegation from Kazakhstan took part in it. Attila is sitting on a white horse and is dressed in red clothes. I know that this color is popular among the Kazakhs. The circle around the rider's figure symbolizes the world, as Attila is considered the subjugator of the world known at that time. The shape of the monument's stone foundation is not accidental either. It's done in the shape of a yurt. We warmly parted with the residents of the village of La Chape and presented them with souvenirs from Kazakhstan. Having done that, we rushed to the last destination of our journey, the place where Attila might have spent his last days before the most famous battle of antiquity. This street carries the name of Attila's camp. Celtic fortification. It says Celtic. Indeed, as the Celts and the Gauls are the same. They made it. Does it mean that this camp is not Attila's? Was it built by the Huns or... No, the Huns of course didn't build it. It's a very complicated construction, so it took many years to build it. They simply used it. It's clear from the scale of this fortification that some regiment or a division lodged here. In spite of the fact that the fortification was not built by the Huns, the popular local memory still holds it as Attila's camp.
Attila waits to have fewer losses among his warriors. Aetius wants only to hold on. He does not even think of an absolutely impossible attack on Attila's army. They both slept little. They remember the years of their friendship. They have known each other for 46 years and have been friends for almost 40 years. Now fate makes them meet on a battlefield. Already 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Around the Emperor Hun, a thick crowd of commanders awaited the order. Suddenly Attila decides to encourage his faithful companions of weapon tired of the strangely long wait and decides to begin finally the battle against his old friend. In a pathetic voice he says, "After so many glorious victories over so many peoples, we are now close to the conquest of the world. It would be stupid and ridiculous for me to try to encourage you with words as if you were people not knowing how to fight." Levy's remarks to the beginning generals, who address themselves to an inexperienced army. Such words are unworthy of me and of you. Indeed, who knows better than you make war? What can be better for a brave man than vengeance with a weapon in his hand? Many of you have shed their blood for the protection of Gaul at the request of Aetius, who has betrayed us, and we will punish him. We shall now throw ourselves upon the enemy. The most courageous will attack the first. We despise this gathering of different peoples, who do not understand one another. They are united today only by fear. Attila reaches out to the adversary. Look how, before the battle, they squeeze one against the other on the heights. Soon we will pursue them from there. For the Romans the slightest injury or even a scratch is unbearable. While hidden behind their shields, they will remain piled up in immobile masses. Attack the Alans, the Burgans and the Visigoths. Let us quickly defeat their cavalry, and thus cut off the nerves and tendons of the enemy's army. The eyes of the commanders light up. They clasp their lances and the sleeves of their swords. Let us cast upon the enemy with the usual fury and courage for you. You are Huns, show your resolution and the superiority of your weapon. That a wounded man kills his opponent and that who is not wounded exterminates them. Those who are destined to live will survive, but those to whom he is destined to die will not avoid death even without war. The enemy will not stand our attack. Attila takes his sword out of the scabbard and raises it to the sky. The trumpets sound. Commanders return to their detachments. Attila shouts, "It is the most courageous who attack the first." The Huns, forward. Roman, Gepid, Frank and Germanic detachments are slowly drawing together and begin to fight. The Romans must repel with the spears the frequent attacks of Alex cavalry on their flanks and behind, protecting themselves from the cloud of arrows by the walls of shields. Orestes sees with surprise the legionaries wearing cuirasses so detested by them and even heavy helmets. An Ostrogoth horseman traverses the troops with the triumphal cry, "King Theodoric is dead. He was killed by the noble Antigus." Orestes knows this officer of the royal Amali family. He cries, "Long live the Ostrogoths!" A victorious clamor rises from the ranks of his warriors. "Long live the Ostrogoths! Hooray!" The Huns routed the Alanian and Burgundian cavalry, and a large part of their detachments disappeared behind the horizon, pursuing the two armies of the Roman allies. Fleeing in panic, Attila remains with the other part of his cavalry to command the battle of his camp. Seeing that Attila is no longer surrounded by a large army, the Visigoths dare to attack the Huns. But the Ostrogoths, reformed and rested, after a temporary withdrawal in their camp traditional for their tactics, throw themselves with new force on the Visigoths. Orestes also sends the reinforcements. Several Goths no longer have their spears left on the bodies of their adversaries or horses. So, they are essentially fighting with the swords. Many Huns warriors have two swords, a long sword in the right hand and a baton in the left hand. Some fight with a weapon that resembles a lance at two ends, one cutting and the other perforating. Finally, Attila takes his warriors to rest in the central camp and chases the Visigoths approached by a cloud of arrows. The Visigoth cavalry, fearing a strong blow from the cavalry of the Huns and the Ostrogoths after their rest, divides into a few small armies. Soon the cavalry of the Visigoths, dispersed in detachments, begin a game of pursuit and escape over the immense space of the Catalaunian Fields. In the extreme case, the Visigothic cavalrymen saved themselves among the Roman squares and went out again. When the Hun cavalry is drawn by the pursuit of the other detachments of the adversary, the Romans, lined up in the impenetrable squares and occupied by the continuous observation of the maneuvers of Alex cavalry, slowly push back the infantry of the enemy. Less numerous but well protected by cavalry and fighting with a quiet assurance. Some detachments enter this square on one side and then go out on the other side and disappear behind the hills. Night is coming, the Hun trumpets begin to ring. The Germanic infantry retires in order to places where invisible bugles and luminous signals called for. Orestes is surprised that the Romans remain with the allied infantry spontaneously brought together or mounted on the heights. Why their trumpets do not sound. Where is Aetius? Indeed, the Romans lost their general. It appears only late in the night accompanied by a detachment of Visigoths who found it. To the questions of Salvian and the other officers who surrounded him at once, Aetius explains, I got lost in the darkness. Then I came across a Hun camp. I managed to save myself. I had to hide often in the grass or among the bushes on my way back before finding a Visigoth encampment. All are shaken. Their commander almost got caught. In the mind of Salvian and several other officers comes the same idea. Maybe, in reality, Aetius met his friend Attila.
Here now an excerpt about the so-called mystery of Attila's fair.
Attila is satisfied. The enemy's cavalry is destroyed. The corpses of the Alanian and Burgundian warriors and their equipment thrown into panic cover the Catalaunian Fields for a distance of several tens of kilometers. They fled so precipitously that their losses were not as great as they seemed. The Visigoths are demoralized by the death of Theodoric and the wound of Prince Thorismund. They came down from the monster rooms only to find the corpse of their king and collect the wounded warriors. The Huns do not stop them. The shaman was right. The Hun horsemen, who perished under the walls of Toulouse, are avenged. Attila rewards the courageous and noble Ostrogoth Andagus of the royal Amali family. His descendants will be proud of his exploit. The Akatseri people lost many horsemen during the attacks of the Roman squares undertaken to protect the allied infantry. Attila has no desire to lose his warriors in attacks against the squares of legionaries well trained by Aetius. After such a victory it is necessary to go home quietly. Attila says to his generals that today and tomorrow the warriors rest and sleep quietly before resuming the road. They deserve it. Then he turns to Edicon. Inspect your war machines. Burns all broken and heavy gear for transport after removing all useful parts. On this fire we will burn the most valorous of our dead knights, so that their graves will not be profaned by the enemy. Attila remarks beside Edicon, the son of this one, I did not even know that your son participated in this battle. I see that he has become a solid warrior. He looks very much like his German mother. He is tall, handsome, and slender. He has almost no Eastern blood. What's his name? Adereka, answers the contented father. A shaman said that he would be the founder of the new great kingdom. Attila smiles. Sometimes their predictions come true. Orestes, who follows Attila, did not like this young fighter with too much confidence. High smoke rises above the Hun camp. The Roman warriors, the Gauls in the majority, come alive. Look, what a giant fire. Probably Attila wants to throw himself into the fire in despair at his defeat. Our heroes committed suicide in this way too. Salvian smiles involuntarily because the Huns do not throw themselves like the Gauls into the fire because of the defeat. They prefer to die in an unequal battle and leave to their descendants the memory of their last exploit. Aetius smiles too, but quickly extinguishes his smile and said loudly, we have defeated. Excited, the Gauls continue to discuss this extraordinary event. Do you recollect how formerly, after the defeat, Julius Sacrovir burnt his house by the side of Autumn, and threw himself into the flames with his companions? Julius Florus and his colleagues immolated themselves in the same way in the mountains of the Ardennes. Sabinus pretended to throw himself into the flames. He then hid 9 years with his wife in a cave. Salvian makes a grimace on hearing the names of the famous Gallic insurgents of the past. And these criminals are the idols of those so-called Roman legionaries.
Listen now to the final excerpt.
The next day the writers begin to pick up and bury the dead. Some come very close to the Roman squares. The soldiers agitate their Huns. But where are the Visigoths? The Huns of Ostrogoth warriors, too busy, let the Roman chariots pass with wine, ham, cheese and fresh bread. On the fields appear the monks who pick up the Romans and their wounded allies. Several wounded were saved by the Visigoths and were already in the convents of the environs. Little by little, everyone calms down. The horsemen finish their sad work and disappear. Suddenly the trumpet sounds in the Huns' camps and the commands were heard. Asleep, after a good breakfast and a few cups of Catalaunian wine, in other words champagne, which was not yet foamy. The Roman and Frankish warriors wipe their eyes and start lined in alarm. In a very short time, the Hun army in an irreproachable order, the tan-graced flags floating in the wind. Squadron after squadron begins to leave the Catalaunian Fields. The Romans unwittingly admired this unforgettable spectacle, the original demonstration of the power and discipline of the Hun army. Thousands of chariots with trophies and booty pass before the nose of the Romans and allies still remaining with them. But none of them feels any desire to try once more to measure themselves by force with the warriors of the steppes and their courageous Germanic allies.